Whoever blesses Israel will be blessed, and whoever curses Israel will be cursed. Well, America's been blessing Israel for over 70 years now, and what has America gotten? Well, we've gotten sodomy, we've gotten transgenderism, feminism, pornography, child trafficking.
Mina, why Rakano? You argue that if Genesis 12:3 were true, America should have become morally better because it has supported Israel. But that's not what Genesis 12:3 says. God never promised that blessing Abraham would give our nation immunity from his judgment. In fact, look at Israel itself. No nation in history received greater covenant blessings than Israel. Yet, Israel was judged repeatedly for idolatry, injustice, and covenant unfaithfulness. So blessing Israel never exempted Israel from God's discipline. Why would he expect America to be different? Genesis 12:3 teaches that God blesses those who blesses Abraham and his descendants. It does not teach that a nation may embrace sin without consequence simply because it supports Israel. America's moral decline does not disprove Genesis 12.
If you want to be a Zionist, go ahead and be a Zionist. Make some political arguments for it, but there is no Christian argument to be a Christian Zionist. The modern state of Israel is not the Israel of the Old Testament.
You argue that modern Israel isn't biblical Israel. Actually, nobody claims the modern state of Israel is identical to David's kingdom or ancient Israel under Moses. That's not the real question. The real question is this: do today's Jewish people still belong to the covenant family that began with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Paul answers that question in Romans 11. Even though many Israelites rejected Jesus as Messiah, Paul still writes, as regards election, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers. Not because Israel is politically righteous, but because of God's covenant with the fathers. The issue has never been Israel's perfection. The issue is God's faithfulness. And read Jeremiah 31 again and again.
The church is the chosen people of God.
You quoted 1 Peter, but Peter begins by addressing the elect exiles of the dispersion, language rooted in the Jewish diaspora. Then you quoted Colossians 3, but Paul never says Gentile believers have replaced Israel as God's chosen people. He calls Gentile believers to live consistently with the holy identity as the chosen people after they were grafted in the community of Israel. And in Romans chapter 11, verse 28, Paul still says of Israel, as regards election, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers. The New Testament teaches participation in God's covenant family, not replacement of Israel.
Not all who are descendant of Israel are Israel.
Romans 9 is not redefining Israel as the church. Throughout Israel's history, not every physical descendant of Abraham, which Paul calls Israel, belonged to the covenant line. Ishmael was not Isaac, and Esau was not Jacob. You are separating Abraham from Israel. Paul does not. Paul moves seamlessly from Israel in verse 6 to Abraham's seed in verse 7 because, in Paul's mind, they belong to the same covenant story.
This quote appears nowhere in the Bible. It's from Genesis 12, and this is where God promises to Abram that he will bless those who bless him and curse those who curse him. But it doesn't say Israel. It's to the offspring of Abraham. And
Actually, this goes back to what I just said. You can't separate Abraham from Israel. So when you say Genesis 12 isn't about Israel, of course Israel isn't mentioned by name. Israel didn't exist yet. Genesis unfolds God's covenant story step by step. The promise begins with Abraham, continues through Isaac, and is confirmed to Jacob, and is inherited by the nation Israel that bears his name. Paul sees the whole nation, the all descendants of Abraham, as one seed. This is what Galatians 3:16 is all about.
And Paul in Galatians...
Again, you misunderstood the verse. Just a few verses later, Paul writes, if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed, heirs according to the promise. Let me read again. If you, plural, belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed, singular. Same principle mentioned in chapter 3, verse 16. If seed referred only to one individual in an absolute sense, why does Paul immediately call thousands of believers Abraham's seed, singular? Christ is a representative for all descendants of Israel. Christ and Israel are one seed. Paul is not denying Abraham's descendants. Paul is emphasizing the oneness of Christ and Israel. So, Kangmina, don't build your theology on one isolated verse, okay? Interpret the New Testament based on what God has already said in the Old Testament, not vice versa.